Hello, welcome, please come in. Our Ranger-only runs are completed, and it's time to talk about how those runs went, and see how each game handles Rangers and their equivalents. And this was mostly pretty fun. Rangers really only share one thing in common, using bows. And how each game has interpreted what the class should be able to do besides that is pretty fun. FF3 has Barrage, FF5 has Barrage and Animals. FF10-2 didn't include Rangers, but did include the thematically similar Gunner, which is basically the same idea, which just has 15 different ways to deal damage. And as usual, FF12 is the weirdo, because the license board didn't originally have classes, and as such interprets classes strangely. This was also probably the most blind I've ever gone into a series. I basically never use Rangers in any of these games. FF3 has better classes for dealing damage, FF5 really just has Rapid Fire as the only useful trait of the class, and while I knew it was strong in certain builds, I'd never really gone through the effort to use it. FF10-2's Gunner always felt like an inferior damage dealer to, well, any class that is designed to do damage, including Warrior, Black Mage, which are functionally starter jobs in 10-2. And while I know I've used the Archer board in 12, because I usually use all 12 license boards in my casual playthroughs, it was really just an add-on with whatever the other board was on the character. So, going into the games kind of ignorant of how effective they are, or could be, things went much better than I expected, with every Ranger variant doing a pretty good job in their respective game, which I was not necessarily expecting. But that is enough preamble, let's dive in. To the difficulty comparison, and we start with FF3, and FF3 gets to slide right into first place in the difficulty listing, though honestly not by that much. Ranger in this game is actually quite good at dealing damage throughout most of the game. Barrage starts off as just a stronger variant of attack, and in the Pixel Remaster, the damage continues to scale up as job level improves, leading to pretty beefy damage by the late game. Also, unlike some other Fire Crystal jobs, you can get good weapons for the entire party as soon as you get the job. And bows themselves are pretty good. You also get a variety of arrows, though how useful that ends up being is debatable, because most bosses don't have any elemental weaknesses, and even Hein just ignores the elemental property of arrows for some reason. Like most classes, Rangers have no ability to heal, which does cause some problems, though it is fewer problems than many of the other classes because the damage I dealt was really good. Meaning, even without healing, I could still win many fights simply by out-damaging the enemy. Rangers are also pretty fast, so they tend to go first, and Rangers have pretty good armor access. Saying all this, you might be wondering why FF3 gets the first ranking in difficulty. Unless you've seen my prior videos of FF3, in which case it will be obvious. First problem is Garuda, who takes normal damage from bows and can use lightning to deal big damage to the entire party. And Rangers, sadly, do not get a wind elemental arrow, so they can't target Garuda's weakness. So I really just have to level up to survive long enough to win the fight. The second problem is the endgame boss rush, which, as ever, is a pain in the butt. 6 bosses all in a row with no save points. While Rangers do deal great damage, they don't deal nearly as much damage as Black Belts, or Scholars, or Ninjas, which makes the fights a bit more tedious, and Riemann in particular decided to be a problem child. It wasn't even the damage that was the problem, it was just multi-target spells combined with my limited single-target healing. This is probably the only run I've ever done where I used any elixirs outside of the Cloud of Darkness fight. And while that made that fight a lot closer, I did still manage it. This run wasn't nearly as difficult as Red Mage or White Mage, but it was pretty tricky in the final segments, earning it first place. And that brings us to FF5. I was unsure how well this class would manage in the early game without their signature bows. I mean, I knew they could equip daggers, but the game is weirdly limited in acquiring daggers at the start of the game. Very odd, considering it's the one weapon type almost all jobs can equip. But then I got Animals, and wow, Animals carried the run for, frankly, a lot longer than I could have possibly dreamed. And right about the time Animals was starting to fall off, I reached the point of buying bows on Crescent Island and unlocking the Rapid Fire ability. Very funny that the Animals ability stops being good at the exact time you would normally start using it. That would explain why I underestimated it leading into this playthrough. But that's okay, it got me to the big damage point of the game, and that was more than enough. Oh, right, I haven't actually ranked this run yet, have I? Let's put it in the second place. It's pretty close between this and third, but I'm okay calling this the second hardest run in the series. Much like FF3, Rangers are good at one thing, after the early game, and that thing is dealing damage. So, any fight I can win by just dealing a lot of damage is pretty easy. There are still tricky fights. X-Death in World 2 has enough HP to survive a while, and has some very dangerous attacks to really punish your party's no healing. Catastrophe was kind of a mess thanks to his big hits and my no survivability, and of course Neo X-Death has Almagust, which just acts as an HP check that my party could not meet until I overleveled a bit. For most fights, Rangers can deal enough damage that their low durability and low healing are non-issues, but when those issues come up, they make themselves very loudly known, to the tune of needing to level a bunch to get that balance back where it needs to be. And that brings us to our third game, 10-2, and this game gets to be placed in third. This is pretty close to FF5, but I think the game is just a bit less difficult. Gunnar's big problem in this game is that it just doesn't deal that much damage most of the time, which is a real bummer considering damage is the only thing Gunnar can do. Honestly, the real reason I rank this run lower than FF5 mostly comes down to the fact that 10-2 is just an easier game. Items are more available, they scale better across the game, and the bosses tend to just be easier to deal with even when you don't have any actual class variety. 10-2 also has spell items, something 5 severely lacks. That means I can use Protect and Shell and Reflect to make bosses easier than they otherwise would be, and because Mug is an acquirable ability thanks to the Treasure Hunt Garment Grid, I don't even have to worry about running out. The real issues Gunnars face across the game come down to low damage and low durability. The damage issue can be mitigated a bit by equipping damage-boosting accessories or garment grids, but it really makes less of a difference than I'd hope. And the durability can be mitigated a bit in the same way, meaning I have to trade off between damage and living, and neither can end up that high. Gunnars do get a special ability set in this game, which they did not in prior Final Fantasies. Unfortunately, most of their abilities are worthless. I'm unclear when you should use Pot Shot, Table Turner, or Cheap Shot, because they seem to just deal less damage than basic attacks, even against enemies with high defense. Honestly, most of the use I got out of Gunplay was Burst Shot for a guaranteed critical hit, which is pretty good damage. Can't help but notice that it doesn't actually seem better than Berserker's basic attack, and it costs MP, so yeah, this game definitely earns its third place. The ending of the game, in a nice change of pace, was much easier than in prior games, though that may be because I overleveled a bit, I think. I tried looking up a recommended level for the final fights, and the internet sure is full of opinions on that. And higher levels meant good damage, and Scatterburst meant huge multi-target damage, which did do a lot to make the end game easier. And we arrive finally at Final Fantasy XII, which gets to slot directly into last place. FF12 was definitely the easiest run, which is kind of exactly what I expected going into this. Archers aren't actually that good of a class in a casual playthrough, but when it's a solo run, they do everything they need to do. The first question is, how is their healing? And the answer is, pretty good. They get every potion lore, every phoenix lore, and every remedy lore. That by itself would typically mean the run is going to be easy, but beyond that, they also get White Magic 4, which gives access to Cura. While archers don't have the magic lores you'd actually want to make that healing good, all target healing that's decent on a character with good magic helps cover healing needs for a surprising amount of time. Phon did have the Netsuke equipped as backup, but Cura handled most healing up to the Pharaohs, I think. And by the endgame, you can easily buy X potions, get 2 Netsukes, and have all the potion lores. Even the Undying never came that close to killing the party, which is a good sign that a class is probably a bit more self-sufficient than they probably should be. I think the only real fights that were tricky are the fights that are always tricky. Ashmal because disease, Slight because too much damage, and is that it? Was Daedalus tricky? Daedalus might have been tricky? Anyway, aside from great healing, Archer is a bit limited. Light armor gives more HP, but the defenses on it are bad, and they don't boost strength like I'd want, though that is fixable on one character thanks to the Shemazai license. The real limiter on archers is their damage, which is bad. They can hit flying enemies, which is nice, but that's really not that exciting considering there is exactly one required fight that is flying, and it's easy enough to beat without a ranged attacker. The low damage isn't nearly enough to put 12 any higher on the list though, mostly because 10-2 still has mostly worse damage, and 3 and 5 both have a much longer list of difficult fights that were tricky to get past. Really, in FF12, the question of difficulty is always about healing. Damage is always secondary. And with the difficulty rankings completed, it's time to dive into the recommendation section. And we start with the first played game in the list, Final Fantasy III, and this game is going to earn the second to last place. As is typical, FF3 scores near the bottom. Though it should be said that a part of this is just that this was a competitive field. I would genuinely recommend any of these runs to someone looking to do a challenge run. Even the last place game. So don't think that I'm being too harsh. I did actually have a lot of fun with this run. But sit tight while I critique the run for a few minutes to explain why it's in second to last place. First, small issue is that Ranger isn't a first crystal job. That means going through a decent chunk of the game without doing the challenge. So early bosses that could be interesting and difficult, like the giant rat, Gutsko, salamander, they are all off the table. This also has the unfortunate side effect of making the video shorter because I can't really talk about anything until I actually get to the class. And then once I do, the game doesn't really have that much interesting from a complexity level. You do get elemental arrows right out the gate, but they are mostly worthless because bosses aren't generally weak to any of them. And Ranger's ability Barrage is pretty one-dimensional. Don't get me wrong, it's very good. Having a button that just deals more damage than an attack would do is great, but it is kind of boring from a strategy perspective. Most fights in this game, including bosses, all come down to press the Barrage button, use high potions as necessary. That is a problem that FF3 suffers from across the board. Any class that doesn't have magic is kind of boring because you don't learn new abilities as you level. So it's not unique to Ranger, but it is present for Ranger, making it kind of a pain. At least Barrage is just good, and getting better bows is usually pretty easy. And next up is FF5, which gets to be placed in the top slot in recommendations. It was a close matchup with our second rated game, but I think FF5 just manages to be the best. Right at the gate, you get Animals, a surprisingly useful and strong ability early game, though it does stop being relevant about halfway through World 1. I mean, you could probably make Animals work longer than that. The problem is the damage doesn't really scale very well, and while the healing would actually be good for a while, you can't control when it actually heals, and the chance of healing will continue to drop from level 19 onwards. I mean, technically if you over-leveled, you could have a decent chance of using Unicorn, though that doesn't start showing up until level 60, so it's not super viable, at least not in a solo class playthrough. Do level boosting items affect Animals? I would assume it does. Anyway, sorry, back to what I'm actually talking about. Aside from the fun versatility that Animals provide, you also get the stupid strength of Rapid Fire, which is just Barrage, but it doesn't scale, which is fine because it starts at dealing 200% damage of a basic attack, which is quite good. FF5 also has a good place in the difficulty level. It's not the most difficult game on the list, but it is definitely difficult enough to be interesting, and unlike FF3, which focuses all of the difficulty in the final boss rush right at the end of the game that's poorly balanced, FF5's difficulty is more spread out. Other than Almagust sucks. Seriously, having a you must have this much HP to win attack is really lame, but that's what we're stuck with, so other than that, the game has interesting difficulty spread throughout. Bosses require interesting tactics to defeat in many cases. I'd say the only real knock against Rangers is right at the end. Accessing enough endgame bows for the entire party sucks. I get why this is. Rangers are the only class that uses bows, other than freelancers, and why would you have more than one in the endgame in a normal playthrough? Still, hours. It took hours. And next up is Final Fantasy X-2, which sadly gets to be relegated to last place. This is a bummer, but it is deserved. Gunner is just a disappointing class. I'm honestly kind of confused by the design of it. Based on the abilities you get, you'd think this is supposed to be a high damage dealer, but they really don't deal that much damage, especially compared to Berserker and other physically focused classes. There were even points where I was sadly reminded of Thief or Alchemist. I guess I haven't done a solo run with more middling damage dealers, so maybe Berserker's damage is just breaking my brain. But aside from mediocre damage, they're also quite frail, so they have okay damage, low durability. That could be fine if they had a nice ability set to compensate, except they don't. Their entire ability set is just damage. 10 different abilities that are all just different flavors of damage. And not even in a good way. I could remove most of their attacks and the class would play basically exactly the same. The only real exceptions are Burst Shot and Scatter Burst, which deal critical damage, and critical damage to all enemies. These are, to be fair, very good. The problem is they are also pretty MP expensive and the class doesn't get very much MP. Combined with gunplay abilities not being accessible to other classes, understandably, means that they are really difficult to use effectively. And yeah, I'm aware I haven't talked about the run, I've just been examining the failures of the class, but those failures are really why this class run gets the lowest ranking. It manages to be just as one-note as FF3, but also worse. Here's all your options, they all do basically the same thing, basically the same way, and MP is a limited resource, so choose carefully. I recall saying something very similar in my Thieves Only run. I really like the design decision to give each dress sphere in this game its own ability list. I like how much more versatility you could give classes that usually are kinda flat with one usable ability. But that falls apart when all the options are damage, but different in meaningless ways. I'm very curious to get to some of the other dress spheres in this game. I really want to see how classes like Samurai, Dark Knight, Warrior stand up, because they also have a lot of deal damage in different ways, but those seem to, from a glance at least, have found more interesting options to make that work. I guess we'll see. But for all those mechanical reasons, 10-2 has to be placed in last. To be clear, I did enjoy the run, despite my criticisms, and when you are at a high enough level to deal good damage, Scatterburst can in fact go wild, but Gunner really could have used a second design pass to have more interesting options. Oh well, maybe next class will score better. And that brings us to the final game for the recommendations, and that is FF12, which gets to slide into second place. What can I say? FF12 is good. And while Archer is definitely not my favorite solo class run I've done in this game, it's not a bad run. But it's also not good enough to take the top ranking. And the biggest reason is that it's pretty easy. The biggest question of whether a run is going to be difficult in this game is always how much healing you have. You want damage, obviously, but the enemies in this game deal a lot of damage very quickly, and how well you cope with that is the most important factor. And archers have healing in spades. They have the magic healing from Cura, which is accessible to everyone, and the healing from Potion and Phoenix lores, of which they have all of them. They are also distinct in that they have all the remedy lores, which means even the fights where healing health isn't enough, they don't really struggle. They share this trait with the Machinist and Shikari, which makes all three able to storm through fights like the Tomato family that can otherwise be pretty tricky. And while doing an easy run can be fun, this kind of is less so. The big reason it's not is because it's not even a stomp through situation. Archers have really poor offense. They are fully reliant on their weapons for damage, but get a shockingly low number of battle lores. The only class that gets fewer is Black Mage, which doesn't care because black magic. Technically, red battle mages get fewer as well if you ignore the ones locked behind espers, but red battle mages also don't care because their weapon ignores strength. The only class with worse offenses is probably White Mage, but even then, you can use Drain against any non-undead to deal reliable damage. As my comment section was quick to point out, this means a decently long playtime, but without any real challenge or difficulty. An easy run can earn a recommendation, and has in the past, but it kind of needs to be a fun romp to be recommendable, whereas Archer is a bit of a slog. Don't misunderstand, it is still second place and was still fun, but that slowness to progress is what cost it the top spot. It is still better than 3 or 10-2 though. And that was Final Fantasies, completed with only the Ranger class, or what I decided were equivalent classes. And that was fun. It's always nice to go into these series when I don't really know what to expect of the class. It's just so hard to predict whether they will be easy or impossible, and thankfully these were mostly breezy outside of a few sections. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos. So if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone, and will remain that way. For now, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.